I got the message at 8:17 in the morning, with no warning, no context, no prior call to prepare me for what I was about to read. It was from my mother, though the tone felt like that of a stranger. It said, "You won't be coming to the wedding. Pedro's family doesn't want you there." Just like that. No greeting, no explanation, not even the effort to disguise the cruelty with a minimum of courtesy. It was a dry, executive phrase, as if she were ordering a light to be turned off, a door to be closed, someone to be erased from the map. I stayed still, staring at the phone screen, waiting for another message to follow, something to soften the blow, to say it was a mistake, that the text had been sent to the wrong number. But no, the screen remained motionless, as if it were enjoying that instant of power, as if every word in that message carried just the right weight to make me feel insignificant. And that's when I realized it didn't hurt because of what it said. It hurt because I wasn't surprised. Because deep down, I knew something like this could happen. I'd known for years, since I started noticing the evasive glances, the uncomfortable silences, the family decisions made without me. Unless there was something to pay for, something to fix, something to take responsibility for. This time, however, they weren't asking for anything. This time they were discarding me outright, like an empty box that had already served its purpose. I didn't reply. I turned off the phone and placed it face down on the table, as if covering it could shut off the pain that was beginning to flare inside me. I stayed seated, staring at the rim of a coffee cup that had already gone cold, unable to understand at what point I went from being part of the family to becoming a burden. Because they didn't even give me the role of enemy. I was simply discarded, excluded, crossed out. It was an emotional assassination. No noise, no witnesses, no trial. And in the middle of that silence, something inside me broke, but not like before. This time it wasn't a sad fracture. It was a clean break, like the line that separates the before from the never again. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't write back asking for explanations. I just knew, with sudden clarity, that there was nothing left to hold on to, nothing to defend, nothing to prove. I had already lost, years ago, but that message was the official signature on the death certificate. It might sound dramatic, but if you've ever felt like you gave more than you received, if you've ever helped hoping that maybe they'd love you just a little in return, if you've ever swallowed your words not to hurt those who had no problem hurting you, then you know what I'm talking about. This isn't just a story about a wedding. It's about how you come to realize that, in your own house, you never had a chair, just a toolbox with your name on it. And if you're hearing this, if you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. I invite you to subscribe to the channel, not out of obligation, but because every person who clicks like and stays is someone who's felt this cold, this distance, this invisible wound. Subscribing is a way of saying, I won't stay silent anymore. It's standing up after years of sitting in the corner, waiting for someone to notice you. This story isn't about revenge, even if some moments may seem vengeful. This story is about boundaries, about dignity, about that exact point where you decide you're not going to drown, just to keep afloat the very people pulling you under. Stay with me, because I'm just getting started. Some things don't happen overnight. You don't suddenly stop belonging. You don't become a burden from one day to the next. What truly hurts is realizing you were part of a game that was never fair, that you were sold the illusion of a family when, in reality, you were only assigned a useful role. I was the responsible one, the fixer, the lender, the payer, the one who's always there. And when I wasn't, I was expected to be. That's how it worked. That's how I was programmed. When Anna said she wanted to marry Pedro, I was the first to react with joy. I didn't even hesitate when my mother, very casually, said it would be good to help a bit financially. That was her way of saying I should cover the deposit for the wedding venue. She didn't ask, she assumed. And I did it, as always, because I was already trained to obey under the disguise of generosity. When Anna couldn't pay her car installments, I was there. When Pedro had a problem with a block card in her name, I was the one who made the urgent transfer. But despite all of that, I was never treated like someone who mattered. I don't say that out of cheap resentment. I say it with the clarity of someone who's checked the scale and sees that all the weight is on one side. On my birthdays, they arrived hours late, or didn't come at all. My mother once gave me an old wallet, saying she found it somewhere and thought of me, while Anna got dinners, surprises, gift-wrapped presents, and photo shoots for every minor achievement. They didn't yell at me. They didn't insult me. It was worse. They diminished me, with jokes that always targeted how I dressed, how I worked too much, how I live alone because I was weird, how I was too serious, too intense to me. But when it came time to organize something, when someone with skills was needed to solve problems, to design, to coordinate, then they remembered me. I wasn't a brother. I was the assistant with shared blood. Anna was always the golden girl. Even when she broke things, got angry, or bad-mouthed everyone behind their backs, the family wrapped her in that protective layer reserved only for favorites. If I said something blunt, I was aggressive. If she exploded, she was sensitive. If I pulled away, I was distant. If she left without saying goodbye, she was independent. Every story was bent to defend her, justify her, celebrate her. And me? I was always told why I should understand her. I remember one afternoon when Anna complained that Pedro wasn't helping with anything for the wedding. And guess who ended up designing the invitations, researching vendors, negotiating prices, and building spreadsheets with guest names? Me. But on the day they posted a photo of the team that makes this dream possible, I wasn't in it. Not even a mention. Not a thank you. Just that plastic smile of a perfect family, as if I had never touched any of it. And it wasn't a forgetfulness. It was a decision. Because in my family, being useful doesn't give you a place. Being useful makes you invisible. The more you give, the more is expected. The more you try, the more it gets normalized. And while Anna bathed in approval, I was falling apart in silence, hoping that someone, just once, would see me as something more than a tool. But no one did. And when that message arrived, that final phrase with which it all started, I understood that they weren't just leaving me at a wedding. They were confirming something that had always been there, disguised as normality. That in this family, I was never one of them. I was only the one who fixed things when they broke. I could have kept enduring, not out of cowardice, but out of inertia. One gets used to the weight of things until they no longer remember what it felt like to walk light. But sometimes what doesn't kill you doesn't make you stronger. It breaks you in silence. And I've been breaking for years. The message was the shot, but the gunpowder had already been loaded before. What came after wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. One afternoon, without looking for it, I came across a post that left me frozen. Anna had uploaded a photo with Pedro and the whole family in a gathering I didn't even know had existed. They were all smiling, hugging, dressed for the occasion, with an aesthetic calculated to scream perfection. The description said, "Grateful to have such proper people by our side. Family is a gift. Proper people. Family." I wasn't there. Not in the photo, not in the text, not in the concept of what they called belonging. At first I thought it was something small, a misunderstanding, that maybe they hadn't wanted to hurt me. But when I read the comments, the discomfort turned into something colder. "What a beautiful family. Everyone who matters is there," wrote a distant aunt. Another comment said, "This is how it should be. No drama, only love and unity." I kept reading each line as if they were sharp blades, because not only were they excluding me, they were denying me. They were actively erasing me from the story, as if not only did I not belong, but had never existed. And that's when the messages started arriving. Not from the ones who mattered to me, but from those relatives who show up only to fill empty spaces with hollow words. "Is it true you're not going to the wedding?" a cousin wrote. "What happened? Did you fight with your sister?" asked another, with a tone of gossip disguised as concern. Some try to justify it. Well, maybe they didn't want to make you uncomfortable with so many people from Pedro's side. You know how things are. Yes, I know exactly how they are. But the most surreal part was what came after. An email. An email as if this were an office, as if emotions could be filed and organized into folders. It was from Anna. She asked me to help her build a website for her bachelorette party, with light colors, clean design, gift list, and confirmation form. She asked me as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been expelled from her ceremony, from her circle, from her affection. There was no apology. There was no explanation, just a list of requirements and a closing line that said, "I'm asking you because I know you're the only one who would do it right." That phrase, so loaded with double meaning, was the final nail in the cross. She asked me not because she wanted me close, but because it was convenient. Because in her world, I didn't exist as a person, but as a function. And if I could still fulfill that function, then I could be useful, even from the shadows. And there, exactly there, I understood that there was no turning back. That this game, which had always been unequal, was now off the board entirely. Because when they ask for help after having thrown you out, that's not love. It's abuse with good spelling. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not this time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't send impulsive messages or threaten to cut ties. What I felt wasn't rage. It was a dense, firm, cold certainty. Something inside me simply shut off. And in that inner silence, where there once was confusion and a need to belong, now there was only clarity. They were using me. And the worst part was that they weren't even hiding it. They excluded me publicly and at the same time kept knocking on the door when they needed something. It was as if it didn't matter how much they stepped on me, as long as I could still deliver something useful. That's when something inside me broke for good. Not with a crash, but with a dry click. And when something breaks like that, you don't glue it back together. You let it fall. That night I didn't sleep. Not because of emotional insomnia, but because I was fully awake for the first time. I sat in front of my computer and opened all the files I had created over the months. Budgets, payment spreadsheets, editable invitations, confirmed bookings, guest lists, daily schedules, decoration designs, optimized routes for vendors. Everything was there. I had built it all. And among those documents, I found one in particular, the confirmation for the wedding venue deposit. I had paid it, like always, from my account. But for practicality, we had put in both our names, so Anna could manage changes if needed. That detail gave me the power they didn't even know I had. I logged into the platform, found the reservation, confirmed the data, and canceled everything. One click. Identity confirmation. Cancellation reason. Done. Non-refundable deposit. Venue released. My hand didn't tremble. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Silent, clean, precise. I stared at the screen like someone watching a door close that they know they'll never cross again. Then I opened the shared cloud folder, the one with all the files I had designed, corrected, and updated for months. And one by one, I deleted them. I didn't leave a single spreadsheet, a single invitation template, a single decoration idea. Nothing. As if they had never existed. As if I had never poured my soul into it. Then I renamed the folder. It no longer said Anna and Pedro wedding. Now it said, "Good luck without me." And I logged out. Not out of anger, but out of respect for myself. Because I finally understood that what they owed me wasn't just gratitude, but something much more essential, humanity. And if they had denied me that, then it no longer made sense to keep giving anything in return. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief, as if, for the first time, I were choosing to protect myself. For years, I had been the one who fixed other people's chaos, who patched things up, who held together collapsing structures just to avoid family embarrassment. But not anymore. Now the collapse wasn't my responsibility. It was theirs, and they were going to face it alone. When I shut down the computer, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not that lukewarm peace you get from giving in, but the real kind, the one that's born when you finally choose yourself. I knew the phone would blow up the next day, that there'd be complaints, shouting, questions masked as concern but loaded with accusation. But none of that worried me, because in my mind, a decision had already been made, and this time, there was no going back. I wasn't going to give any more explanations, no justifications, no apologies for not meeting expectations that were never fair to begin with. This time, silence would be my only language. And believe me, when you get used to the sound of your own dignity, other people's noise doesn't scare you anymore. For a few seconds, that felt eternal. No one said a word. It was as if time had stopped moving, as if everyone was holding their breath at once. But silence doesn't last long when masks are falling. And in that place, at that rehearsal dinner that was supposed to be a celebration, what followed was an implosion. Pedro was the first to crack. I saw him stand up, stiff, as if suddenly even standing took effort. His eyes went from Anna to me, from me to his phone, as if looking for an explanation that wasn't anywhere. "Is this real?" he said, barely holding his voice together. Anna didn't answer. She lowered her head. She didn't deny anything. She didn't even try to explain. She just stayed there, cheeks burning, eyes empty. Pedro asked again, louder this time. "You said all that? You planned to use him? You told me he exaggerated, that he lied, that he was bitter." The tension in the room became unbearable. One of the aunts started crying silently. Another was crossing herself, as if that could save anything. Mom stood up, visibly shaken, and pointed her trembling finger at me. "Why did you do this, Juan? This wasn't necessary." Her voice had that all-too-familiar tremor, the kind of someone who can't accept that they've lost control. "You ruined your sister's night," she shouted, as if the betrayal hadn't come from Anna, but from me for exposing her. I just looked at her, without replying. I didn't come to justify myself. I came to make things clear. She kept going. "You could have spoken in private. This isn't how family does things." And at that, I couldn't help but say, with a firm tone, though I didn't raise my voice, "Exactly, Mom. This was never a family." Pedro picked up his jacket, looked at Anna with a mix of disgust and sadness, and said something I'll never forget. "If you were able to treat your own brother like this, what's in store for me?" Then he turned around and walked out. Just like that. No ceremony, no goodbyes, no looking back. The wedding was canceled in an instant. As if the moment the lie was exposed, the whole show ran out of air. The shouting started then. Uncles demanding explanations. Anna sobbing out incoherent words. Mom begging someone to fix this. But there was nothing left to fix. I just stood still, watching each of them try to sweep under the rug of fire that had already consumed the entire structure. Then I did what I had needed to do for a long time. I walked to the center of the room, looked at everyone one last time, and said in a low but steady voice, "This ends today. I'm no longer part of this game. I'm not going to keep pretending I belong to a family that used me, lied to me, and threw me away. I didn't come to destroy anything. I came to let go of what was never mine." And with that, I turned around and walked toward the exit. But before crossing the door, I stopped for a second. There was a curtain with a decorative cord by the entrance. Without thinking too much, I took that cord between my fingers and cut it. It was symbolic, but to me, it meant everything. Cutting that string was like cutting the last invisible ties that bound me to a narrative in which I had always been the secondary character. Useful, but invisible. The curtain fell, and I walked off stage by choice. Outside, the air was different. Colder, yes, but also purer. I walked without looking back, not out of pride, but out of respect. Respect for everything I had been, for everything I had allowed, and above all, for everything I would never allow again. After that night, I didn't answer a single message. No calls, no emails. I erased myself. Literally. I changed my number, deleted social media, sold the apartment, And in less than a week, I was on the road, with a trunk full of books, some old shirts, and a notebook where I had scribbled a single thought. Starting over is also an act of self-love. I left without a map, but with a clear direction, away. I ended up in a small town down south, where no one knew my last name or what had happened. I rented a cabin with wooden walls and the scent of eucalyptus, surrounded by trees that creaked as if they too were letting go of something. There, without the noise of obligation, without the strings of a family that only recognized me for what I could give, I started to breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel that constant pressure in my chest. It was as if the silence had given me back to myself. It wasn't easy at first. Emptiness has a strange voice when it settles in. Some days, I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I had overreacted. But all it took was remembering those voices mocking me, those looks full of calculation, for the guilt to go quiet. And when the outside world tries to reach you, but no longer has the keys to get in, they start to panic. I received notifications of attempted contact, new numbers, emails with subjects like, urgent, please, let's talk. You don't know what you've done. I didn't open a single one. My silence was my answer. And over time, it became my refuge. I discovered, or rather, remembered, a forgotten passion I had abandoned for lack of time, for lack of mental space. History. I had always been fascinated by old documents, traces of the past. So I enrolled in a course on archival preservation, something that sounded so far removed from emotional chaos that it turned out to be perfect. Every document I restored felt like a metaphor, an old life, mistreated by time, being carefully repaired. And I, through that process, was slowly healing too. I got a job at a local museum, small but full of soul. There, among foggy glass display cases and manuscripts that smelled of dust and time, I found a calm I had never felt before. No one asked me for favors. No one manipulated me. No one reminded me of what I had to do out of love. Finally, everything I did was because I chose to do it. Silence became a powerful tool. Where I used to defend myself with explanations, now I defended myself by saying nothing. Where I used to seek approval, now I simply didn't respond. I heard rumors about lawsuits, desperate attempts to recover what they had lost. But since I didn't reply, those attempts faded. They were screaming in an empty room, and that emptiness was me. Inaccessible, untouchable. There was something beautiful about not having to justify my existence, about waking up every morning and deciding what to do without the shadow of a family that only valued you for your usefulness. And even though, at night, the echo of who I had been, of what I had endured, sometimes returned, there was also the constant relief of knowing I would never again be that one who said yes just to avoid losing the little affection he was given. Here, among mountains and silence, I became mine again. I don't know if that's happiness, but it's definitely peace. And peace, after so much noise, is a higher form of freedom. Over time, silence began to do its work, and it was devastating, not out of revenge, but because when the gear you always kept turning stops, the whole system creaks. From a distance, without seeking it, I started to hear about the consequences. The venue where the wedding was supposed to take place was never recovered. Since I had canceled the reservation with no refund, no one else wanted to put up money to book another one. The venue ended up for sale, with a sad photo circulating online. The same space I had paid for, now deserted, with a for sale sign hanging from a rusty corner. I guess no one dared to take it down. Or maybe no one wanted to touch it. The bouquet of flowers Anna had ordered weeks in advance ended up wilted at the florist's. It had been left behind, as if after Pedro canceled everything, there was no point in even picking it up. I was told the florist, a woman who had nothing to do with any of this, put it in an old pot outside her shop. And every time someone passed by and asked why there were dead flowers at the entrance, she would sigh and say, Those are for a wedding that never happened. That bouquet became a sort of sad legend in the neighborhood. But that was just the surface. The darkest part came later. Antonio, my uncle, though that word no longer means anything to me, tried to take advantage of the confusion to sell a property that was technically in my name. He claimed he had rights because he was family, but years earlier, I had legally protected that inheritance on a lawyer's advice. I never thought I'd need it, but I did it. And thanks to that, when he tried to transfer it with forged documents, he ended up facing a lawsuit. They tried to blame me, even smear me on social media, but it all fell apart once the attempted fraud was exposed. He was the one who ended up in trouble. The irony is that for years, they call me paranoid for taking legal precautions. Now that paranoia had become his downfall, the family, instead of coming together to reflect, did what they knew best: look for a common enemy. And since I was no longer around to be the scapegoat, they tried to fabricate one in my absence. They launched a smear campaign on social media, spreading their version of the story. So sugar-coated it bordered on the ridiculous, that I was ungrateful, that I ruined a wedding out of jealousy, that everything I did was out of selfishness. But the problem with lies is that no one buys them anymore when the evidence against you is audio recordings, screenshots, and irrefutable facts. The story turned against them. People who had known me for years, even those who didn't know the full truth, started to see the cracks. They realized something didn't add up. That no one destroys something without a reason. That maybe the problem wasn't me. The narrative they had so carefully protected fell apart. They were no longer the perfect family. Now they were the ones who kicked out the brother who paid for everything, the ones who mocked him behind his back, the ones who ended up with no wedding, no reputation, and a nephew who vanished without a trace. I was told that at family gatherings, my name is barely mentioned. And if someone does bring me up, the air gets tense. It's as if saying my name invokes a shared guilt that no one wants to face. And that, in a way, is the deepest consequence of all. When someone like me leaves, it's not noticeable at first, because you're used to being invisible. But over time, your absence becomes an echo no one can silence. Because I'm no longer there to serve, to soothe, to fix what they themselves keep breaking. And when the Savior leaves, what remains is the true face of those who are used to manipulating him. Sometimes, the punishment isn't the scream. It's the silence. The silence of someone who doesn't return, who no longer answers, who simply stopped existing for them. Next to the entrance of my new home, there's a mailbox. One of those old metal ones, painted red, with chipped paint and a small rusty slot. When I first found it, it was crooked, like it had weathered many storms. I decided to fix it, but once I finished, I didn't put my name on it. I didn't write my address. I didn't even lock it. I left it there, open, visible, but empty, because that mailbox, like my life, is no longer designed to receive what I once accepted without filters, reproaches, excuses, emotional blackmail disguised as apologies. That mailbox accepts nothing now. Or rather, it only accepts peace. Sometimes the neighbors ask why I never use it. I smile and always tell them the same thing. Because this box doesn't accept apologies. And they don't understand. And they don't have to. Because that mailbox isn't just metal. It's a boundary, a statement, a symbol, just like me. I used to be the one who was always available, the one who fixed things, the one who gave money, time, energy, the one who stayed quiet when the jokes hurt, when being forgotten hurt more than being present. I was the savior and, at the same time, the scapegoat. Because in many families, those who give the most are also the first to be blamed when something goes wrong. Because we're useful until we get tired, until we wake up. And that's what I did. I left, not out of resentment, not for revenge. I left out of respect, for myself. Because there's a line that, once crossed, can no longer be blurred. Once you see who uses you, who smiles at you with calculation, who only wants you around when it suits them. You can't unsee it, and staying after that isn't nobility. It's self-abandonment. What I found in this distance isn't emptiness, as many fear. It's fullness. It's the absence of noise. It's waking up without having to justify my place in anyone's life. It's drinking a cup of coffee, hot, this time, without interruptions, without imposed obligations, without feeling like I have to earn love that was never genuine. It's walking through this town, greeting the baker, talking to the kids at the museum, and feeling more at home than I ever did in my childhood. Sometimes people ask me if I miss my family. I don't know how to answer that. Missing implies you had something solid, something real. I had a role. I had a function. But love, I'm not sure that's what they gave me. And I don't hate them for it. I just chose to stop begging for it. Silence, the very thing I once feared, ended up being my greatest ally. Because in it, I heard myself for the first time. In it, I answered myself. And thanks to it, I rebuilt myself. Without shouting, without explanations, without battles, just distance, just decision. Today I'm no longer the fixer, the one who pays, the one who stays quiet. I'm just Juan. And for the first time, that's enough. So if you're out there listening to this, and you feel like your story sounds like mine, I want to tell you something. Without drama or magic formulas. Walking away doesn't make you bad. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. Letting go doesn't make you any less worthy. Sometimes, walking away is the greatest act of self-love we can choose. Because staying, when everything already hurts, is just a slow way to disappear. And I chose not to disappear. I chose to exist. Just this time for me. There are objects that outlive people. Symbols that, although simple, hold everything we were, everything we left behind, and everything we choose to become. Sometimes when I walk alone in the afternoon, I find myself thinking about 3 of them again. The first, the cold coffee. How many times did I drink it without tasting it? How many times did I serve it? And before taking the first sip, I was already solving someone else's problem. When I think of that coffee, I think of who I was, present but ignored, useful but invisible. The cold coffee is everything I allowed. Everything I kept silent while my own internal temperature dropped and no one noticed. Today I drink my coffee hot, and I let it cool only if I want to. Not because the phone rang, not because someone needed something urgently. I heat my coffee, and if it gets cold, it's because I chose to pause. That, to me, is the simplest definition of freedom. The second, the Los Suspiros Hacienda. A bitter irony I can only now see clearly. A place I financed with hope, expecting that for once in my life, my efforts might bring recognition. But it ended up being the setting for exclusion. An altar without a ceremony. A castle made of smoke. The sighs that gave it its name weren't of emotion. They were of resignation. Mine was the last I heard there. Not audible, but echoing through every corner the moment I chose not to return. When I left behind not just a place, but the idea that every effort deserves gratitude. Because not everyone knows how to receive, and not everyone knows how to see. And the third, the mailbox. That mute box by the entrance of my house. No name, no recipient. A kind of symbolic tomb where I bury everything I no longer accept. Late apologies, manipulative attempts, memories I don't want to recycle. Sometimes, when it rains, it gets wet inside. And it makes me think even metal cries when it holds too much. But it remains there. Steady. Silent. Like me. Some people will say I'm exaggerating. That family is family, and one must forgive. I believed that too, for years. But one day, I understood that forgiveness isn't always about reopening the door. Sometimes it's about closing the cycle without saying a word. Sometimes it's about saying, this is as far as I go, and never looking back. Because love, if it's real, can't depend on how many times you give in, or how many humiliations you're willing to endure. Love that demands sacrifice without reciprocity isn't love. It's emotional dependency dressed up as duty. Today, I walk through this town without anyone owing me anything. And that's beautiful. Not because no one needs me, but because I no longer need validation to feel worthy. I live peacefully. I study. I water my plants. I sort old files at the museum while listening to soft music. And when someone smiles at me without knowing who I am, I feel that small act of humanity is worth more than a lifetime of forced acceptance. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not for listening to my story, but for holding on to yours. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that we are not alone. There are thousands like me, like you, trying to break cycles, stepping away from the noise, realizing that peace doesn't always live where we were born. Sometimes, it lives where we choose to begin again. And if you ever wonder whether walking away was the right decision, remember this. Your life is not an inheritance others get to manage. It's a page only you can write. And if you're tired of writing with someone else's ink, then it's time to get your own pen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing yourself. And remember, this box does not accept apologies.